Hi, my name's Tim Paul. I'm one of the Fusion product managers for manufacturing. I get asked a lot about my own personal workflows and how I utilize CAM assemblies. Assemblies like my vices, my machine table, and other work holding. I get asked about my workflows enough where I thought it'd be worth making some videos. Over the years, I feel like I've come up with a pretty good system that helps me create predictable and efficient setups. In this video, I'll go through how I set up a 5th axis self-centering vise. In following videos, I'll show how I use my modeled machine table with a simulated work envelope and a library of different work holding to streamline accurate and efficient programming and setups. So for this video, we're going to talk about vise assemblies for CAM. Here's my hit list for creating reusable vise CAM assemblies. First, we're going to turn off our history. I like to reset the home view. We're going to make the jaws independent, and we'll talk about why we do that when we're in the software. Then we're going to create subassembly components. I create the subassemblies and I organize them into visibility or functionality states. If I want to show or hide, different sections, that's generally how I'll break it up. In a vise, generally I'm going to break it into functionality, like a base and a front jaw and a rear jaw. Then we're going to create stock components. Sort components into subassemblies. Then we're going to make some rigid groups, make some mates, set some stock parameters, use those stock parameters to model the stock, and then we'll add some joints to the stock. Okay, so as I mentioned in the PowerPoint slide, now that we're in Fusion, the first thing we're going to do is I downloaded this 5th axis vise from the 5th axis website. And it comes in, as all these different components. Inside each component, this assembly just has one body. So you can see we can, show or hide things. You can click here. You can show and hide like that. So the first thing, as I mentioned in that hit list, is I like to reset my home view. The reason I like to do that is the saved view over here in your data panel is the way it's set in your home view. If you're in whatever orientation you go to your home view, that's the preview that you get there. So I generally, with my vices, I like to see the front of the vise in kind of an isometric view. On a 5th axis vise, if you see where it's to open is to go clockwise, I use that as the back of my vise. So let's set this. So I'll just go to the isometric view. I'll right click on the home and then I'll reset my home view. And I just fit to view. That way, if it's in some other weird view and you want to go back to that view, you can. But I also like how it sets the preview up in the data panel. So now we'll save it. And this is where I would just write a note to kind of let myself know what I did when I saved it. So reset home view. I'll close my data panel for now. So the other thing I like to do at the beginning of a vise assembly that I'm going to reuse for CAM is I come up here and I make sure that capture design history is not turned on, because we're going to do some stuff here that I don't want or really need the design history for. And the next thing we're going to do, I actually can only do without the design history. So I put on that hit list the make jaws independent. So what that means is if I click on this jaw and I click on this jaw, you can see that kind of at the end it says 1 and 2. It means one's basically a copy of the other. If I came in here and edited this jaw and cut a hole in it, or let's say I had some soft jaws and I cut a pattern in here to hold parts, it's going to do it to this jaw as well. So what we want to do is right click on that and make that independent. We'll right click on that and you'll see it doesn't have an option to make it independent because this was already made independent. So I think that's a new feature, that you can drag stuff around in the tree. It used to be they existed where they were. So I like to just keep those together. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create some components, and really what they are is a top level of a subassembly. So in a vise, I like to break it up into digestible chunks. So generally, I want the whole base assembly to be together. And for me, the base assembly is also the screw that goes through there, or the main screw that goes through there. And then I like to keep the movable jaws, so that's going to be this and all the hardware that goes with that. So to create new components, we're just going to right click up here and say new component. I'll do one for the base, I'll do one for the rear jaw, one for the front jaw, and then one for the stock. So now I'll come down here and click slowly on them twice. So I'll call this the base. I'll call this the rear jaw. I'll call this the front jaw. And then I'll rename this to the stock. Inside the stock, we'll end up having some kind of subgroups from there. If we want, we can do that right now. I generally would do that later because this tree is so long. But we can right click, new component, and new component. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to rename these to centered stock. And I'll put left stop stock. And I'll call this right stop stock. Okay. So let's minimize those for now. Now what I want to do, if I come back up here and activate this top level so I can see everything clearly. Now what I want to do is basically I want all of this stuff to go in the base assembly. So let's just start by grabbing, I'll shift select and grab these things. Actually, some of this stuff I don't actually want. So just grabbing those there. So that's the base. Let's just drag that down into the base. One of the little tricks I like to do is turn the visibility off of the base. And that actually makes it kind of nice to see what's getting drug into there. So if I drag that like that, that'll actually miss these. And then I can go and click on everything I want to drag. Actually, do that. Do that. And then we should be able to drag that over into the base. Sometimes that doesn't work, and you just have to... Actually, that's... Yeah, so let's just do these. So we'll grab everything from there to there. Actually, these guys are giving me a fit, aren't they? So we'll grab... I don't want to take these over with it, so let's... So sometimes we ought to figure out what's happening here. These are tied together, so I'm guessing there's a subassembly in here. Yeah, so that guy's inside of this, which is kind of doesn't make sense to me. So we'll drag that out. I think that what that did is it grabbed that bolt right there. So I just hit back because I want to see what's going on here. Okay, so now I grabbed all of these. I'm going to hit control. Well, let's just grab everything from here to here. This is actually the hardest part, is just kind of deciphering down through all the hardware. So what we're going to do... Yeah, so the way this is assembled is all these guys are kind of these sub-assemblies, which is pretty annoying if you ask me. So I'm actually going to create a new sub-assembly inside of the base. I'll call these studs. So new component. Okay, so then now what we'll do is we want to break these up. So normally I haven't run into this before, but these are going to be hiding in here. So we'll take this and we'll drop that into the stud assembly. We'll take this, which is right here, drop that into the stud. kind of little sub-assembly. Looks like that's hiding in there. Okay, so it looks like we're kind of moving ahead at least. So the next thing I'll do is I'll see where this guy's hiding. So this and this are part of the base. This through here is part of the base. These are part of the base. Okay, so everything else is the jaw assembly. So let's break those up now. So now we have the base, we have those hidden. Now everything here we want to drop into the front jaw assembly. I'm going to turn on my base to make sure that's right. Yeah. So we'll turn off the front jaw assembly. Take everything from here to here, drop that into the front jaw assembly. And then take this and put that in the front jaw assembly. So now everything left should be for the rear jaw assembly. And we can make sure we got everything. So the reason I make these, hide the visibility is so that I can kind of make sure I got everything along the way and didn't miss something. So let's hide the front and rear jaws for now. And if we expand the base, now I have to decide what kind of movement or joints that I want, because now everything still moves around, right? So the first thing I like to do is, now is the time I would create a turn on the history. So from here I'm going to capture the design history. So nice thing about doing all of that work without the design history is you don't get all the move commands that kind of fill up your timeline. But now we want to have the option of putting some as-built joints in, and you don't get those with the design history turned off. So with the design history turned on, I'm going to expand my base and everything from here. Actually, the first thing I want to do is I want to make a rigid group, an as-built, not rigid group. I want to make an as-built joint from here to here. And what that's doing is it's locking in that base. So now I can't move it around, where I can still move all that stuff around. And some people will try to, I don't use it, so I don't remember what it's called, but some people will ground, I think they call it. So they'll ground this, but that doesn't transfer from assembly to assembly. So when we talk about reusing all this, we're putting a good amount of work into this. So we want to be able to reuse it in other CAM assemblies, and grounding kind of messes that up. So once I have that ground, like I was showing before, that can still move around. This can still move around. I want to make them all rigid. I want to make a rigid group. So if I highlight all of them, and I'm just going to shift select if you didn't pick that up. I'm holding shift, I'm clicking on that, holding shift and clicking that. Now what I'll do is I'll right click on that and I'll make a rigid group. So now I can't move any of that stuff around. It's kind of a nice way to do that. So now I can minimize that, and the next thing I'll do is go to the rear jaw. And I want all this stuff to stay together as well. So I will, one thing that we're going to have to do that I should talk about is we're going to have to make another assembly. I break it up because you can put these jaws on, facing in or facing out, so you can just flip them. And I make two separate assemblies. One says jaws in, one says jaws out. So I have to decide how I want to assemble these guys, because it would be valid to make them all one rigid group, and then when we kind of make a save as, we can rotate it. But for now, I think I actually want to, probably hide this, and I'll make a joint, and that should make it a little bit easier to, to flip that jaw next time. So we're going to make a rigid group here. And then this guy, hopefully we can just drag that to the bottom or the top. Yeah, it doesn't let us. So then now what we want to do is we want to take this guy and we want to add a joint. Capture the design history. I'm going to make a joint from here to there. Now that's rigid. So now when I move all this around, it moves together. I like to hide those joints too. So this joint, this rear jaw is ready to go. And we'll do just the same on the front jaw here. So the jaw is that one. So we're going to shift select all of these, control select that, make this a rigid group. And then we will make a joint from here to here. We're going to make that a rigid joint. We have all these other joints that work for different things, but this is what works best for me for this. And the reason I'm not making all that one rigid group is because I think when I do the jaws out, I think that'll make it a little bit easier for me. So I'll turn on the visibility of those, and that guy you can see is up and moving around like that. I don't really like that, but it's really not the worst thing in the world. And hide those joints. Show the base, show the rear jaw. That way it's there. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is intelligently locate these jaws. So my intent is I want to be able to drive a stock dimension from a parameter and have the jaws move and the stock that we're going to make move with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going to the parameters. And actually, for me, I just click on this guy right here for parameters. I don't even remember where it belongs. I guess it's in the Modify tab. And then I'm going to make a few different parameters. So I'm going to say stock X. And we'll just say 3 inches. I'll make another parameter that says stock Y. Say 2 inches. I'll make another parameter that says stock Z. Say 1 inch. So now I can reference these when I'm designing my stock or doing really anything. So now what I like to do is we will make a couple joint origins, because what I want is, you can see these teeth, or some are higher than others. What I really want is to have these drive a distance from the opposite one that matches my stock. So we're going to make some joint origins. The first joint origin I want to make is actually from the center of the jaw, for the center of the vise. And I'm actually going to shift that up to this height here. Okay. So then what we'll do is we'll add 2 stock origins, or joint origins here, another joint origin there. So if you didn't know this little trick, if I'm holding my right mouse button, it pulls up this little panel, and the last thing I did is straight up. So then I can add a joint origin here, and you can see how this kind of wants to move around a bit. It's going to the middle. If I want it to be flat on this surface, while I'm over here I can hit Control, and then it'll lock to a location. So from here I want to shift it back to be even with this, so that way it's straight down from there. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make another joint origin here, hold Control, click it there, shift it back to one of my higher teeth, which is this one right there. Okay. So now I have these 3 joint origins. Now I can make some joints. The reason I made these joint origins is because there wasn't a point, right here where I kind of met my design intent, right? There wasn't a point right here. If I wanted to make a joint from the middle of this line or the middle of this line, I could, but I want my stock, I want to create a joint from my stock, contact point. So now I can make a rigid joint from here to here. And then now what I want to do is I want to shift it, say stock Y, divided by 2. So now from the center over, it is the stock, it's half of the stock, right? So now what I want to do is I want to connect this joint origin either back to the center or the stock distance away from that joint origin. So what I want to do is I want to find that, I want to turn that stock origin there. I want to turn the visibility back on. So I could right click on it and say find in browser, and that'll help me find it right there. You know, something I haven't done is I want to see if I can just create a joint from there to there. Yeah, it doesn't look like I can. So I want to show the visibility on that. Click it there. See, it gets flipped. So we're going to hit this flip button and make it the way we want it. We'll drag this over, and this is where I'll just type in stock Y. Okay. So now, let's hide the visibility of those joints. So now if I go to S, so this is a little nice shortcut. If I hit S, a little shortcut thing pops up, and if I want to find parameters or something, I can find them. And you can see you can add them. It's already in my little toolbox, my shortcut toolbox. And if you want to take them out, you can just hit that. If you want to put them back in there, you can do that. You can also just drag and throw them out, but I like that guy too much to throw it out. Actually, I also have this S key programmed on my Space Pilot, so if you use one of those, I think I have the Space Pilot Pro, so it's programmable. So now what we can see here is if I just type in these values, this will change your stocks values. So one of the things I do like to do is kind of find a minimum. So it looks like that's about the minimum gap. And so what I would usually do is over in the comment I would put minimum 125. Once I figure out what the maximum is, I'd put that in there too. Alright, so let's make that stock a little bit bigger, say 1 inch. Okay, so now we're ready to make our stock and mate our stock. So here we go. Let's just collapse that. We're going to turn on this stock here, and then I'm going to make a new sketch. I'll just make a new sketch here. Just want to be kind of normal to that surface, and I can just come here and say stock. This is going to be my stock X. Tab stock. This will be my stock Y. Actually, I got that backwards, didn't I? And I'll change this to stock Y. If I finish the sketch, that'll actually, normally I would just do an extrude on this and hit stock Z. So now that is transparent. If I activate that top level, now when I come into bodies here, I can actually come here and make this opacity like 50%. I like my stock to be translucent like that, and you'll see that stock can move around anywhere now. And so what we need to do is we're going to copy this. I just paste it in here. I don't move it. You could if you wanted. I just paste it into each one of my stock locations, and then we'll add a joint. Okay. Now we can hide the visibility of that first one, and then actually we'll hide the visibility of each of these. So the only thing we're seeing now is this one that we're going to put in the centered location. So how do we want to make a joint for that? Let's see how this works. If I just click on this, I can just center it right here. The problem with that is that it's not actually perfectly centered. So if I just go to like a shift move, I can take one of my higher teeth here and actually shift it to that location. So now you see if I go to this right view, it's lined up perfectly with those, it's lined up perfectly with that, and it's lined up evenly left and right. So now if I go to my parameters, maybe shorten that up a little bit, and if I make this 0.5, the jaws and the stock move together, and the stock is driven from the parameters. So that's fun. It's super helpful for me in the workflows that I do. So hopefully you'll find that it's helpful for you. So now I turn off the visibility of the centered stock, show this stock, and then we got a couple of ways we could do this here. And this is just the way I do it. There's plenty of ways that we can all kind of micromanage this stuff. So I'm just going to snap it here. Same thing. So I went to that corner and snap it there. And then I'm going to drag it this way and snap it there. So now on my left stop, with my vise facing this way, the stock is stopped on the left, and then we need to do it one more time for the right. So I'll show that, and then we'll do the same thing. We'll just make a joint, and this, you know, sometimes you kind of get this little origin to kind of snap around, and if you don't like that, just put it on the surface you want it normal to, hold Control, and then put it down in that location that you want there. So some people might ask, like, why don't just snap it here? That's actually a valid question and way to work. I can't really explain. It's just the way I started doing it. So then we'll drag it there and there. And there we go. So now we have a centered stock, a left stop stock, and a right stop stock. And when we go to save, it goes there. So that's probably a lot to take in. But in coming videos, I'll show how I actually make these work. So the next thing we need to do, let's say ready for MFG, JAWS in. Okay, so now what I do, if we go up to this folder system, I'm going to save this as, we already saved it, so now I'm going to save as, and we'll say JAWS in, and that way when I go to reuse it, that's what I know to use. So that's that. And then the next one we'll use, actually I don't need a duplicate, so I'll just close that and I'll open this one. Okay, so now it's time to take that first assembly and essentially flip the jaws around and get the stock all sorted out. So I may or may not be doing this the most perfect way, but the end result is effective and it's not really that painful. So feel free to do this any way that works for you. But I'm going to go through and look at my history. And this joint is what locked this jaw down to that kind of carrier piece. And then this joint here locked that one down to that one. So I'm going to drag the history back to here. I'm going to delete that. I'm not sure what happens if I delete that. So that basically just moves it around like that. That was just that capture position thing was the second thing I deleted. So I'm going to move this. Some people don't. They just handle it at the joint level. But so I'm going to move that there, and I'm going to make a joint. So now I can just make a joint from there to there. Hit OK. And then I'll come forward to this joint and I will delete those two things. So now I can move that up. If I click on this, actually I think I can find in browser. Go like that. Go to move. I like to flip that guy around 180. And then I can make a joint from here to here, hit OK. So now we have these, things that are tied together the way we intended them to be. And then when we come forward to these joint origins, if you remember on the other one, we put this joint origin in, and then we put these in. I might be able to shift those around. I just delete them and make new ones. So take a joint origin from Remember, I want it to be flat because I want it to be the same orientation as that center one. So just do that. Hold Control, click it there, shift it to there. Same thing here. Hold Control, click it there, and shift it to there. So this guy I want to find in the browser because I want to turn him back on. So join origin. It gets hidden when it gets consumed in that joint. So I just wanted to show that again. And then this, we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're just going to make a joint from here to here. I'm going to start dragging it in that direction. And I'm just going to type in stock Y divided by 2. And then this one, I'll do the same thing. Instead of going to that center, actually let's hit cancel. I'm going to show this in the browser. Join origin, show it. That way I can actually see and do something with it. And then we'll do a joint. And it's important to start your joint from the object that's going to move. And then do that first. Click on where you want it to go second. Flip it so it's there. Drag this over. Negative stock Y. Hit OK. So we'll see here we have to actually move that out with the parameters because that actually won't work like that. So if we do 2 inches, that should be fine. And if you want, you can say what's the distance from here to here. And copy that. Come back in here, and you can say 2 minus that, right? So now if we hit tab, that's your new value. Let's do 1 1/4. Let's change that to 1.25. And then this, our minimum, will be 1.25. That way there's still enough to actually squeeze and dig the teeth into a 1 1/4 inch material. So now we need to roll forward again. And these 2 guys are invalid because they referenced something that's not there anymore. So we'll delete those, come all the way out to here, and then these stock joints are going to have a problem. So let's just delete those. We could probably just redefine them, but I'll just delete them. Let's clean up the tree over here and get into the stock. So let's show the center stock. And we will take a joint, put it right there, right there. And I actually pull this away just so I can actually get in and see better. But I pull it in a direction and then shift it. So now if we go to this view, it lines up nice on each side. Lines up on the bottom and each side perfectly. So now we hide that, turn this on, do a joint. I can click it right there and then shift it back if I want. So I can click here, click there. This is acceptable. Yeah, it's a little funky, so I'm actually going to pick that back up where I did that first one. Let's take a look at this one more time. So let's make a new joint. Click here, click here. Yeah, I'm not sure what it was doing before, but I'll shift that back to that first, and then I'll shift it over to the left. Okay, so we'll hide that, show the right, and do the same thing here. So control, place that there, put that there, shift it back to that point, shift it over to that point. Okay, so now we have that. We'll go to home, make sure this works. So we have centered, we have left stop, We have right stop. Okay, so I'll go to centered. It's already in the home view. I'll hit save, and I'll say ready for MFG. I think we're going to call this JAWS out. Okay, so we'll close this, and then here I'll just rename this. Oh, I'm actually on the wrong one. So then what I'll do is I'll add JAWS out. Okay, so that's how I assemble a vise that's going to be reusable and ready for manufacturing assembly later. I hope that's been helpful, and keep an eye out for the next videos.